Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to virtually see all of you again for the first time since I know our last sessions for cohort A and B were in February and March. And not only was it a while ago in terms of timeline, it was also a lifetime ago in terms of just the way that business operated and what it looked like. So I'm so glad to be with all of you again today. I hope you're joining us feeling healthy and safe. I want to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, for making this event possible, and to thank our incredible partners today, CBT Architects, who we'll be hearing from a lot more in just a moment. Because this is our first session together on Zoom, I wanted to establish a few Zoom norms for this group. First, please keep your cameras on if you are able to. That is going to allow us to replicate that in-person event experience that I know we're all really craving right now during this time of physical distancing. Secondly, please add your company name to your Zoom name to replicate the name tags we usually have for you. You can do that by clicking on the ... button that's in the upper right-hand corner of your video, then clicking rename, and then changing your name to first name, last name, comma, company. Third of all, please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. It will minimize all of the background noise and distraction. However, during the Q&A section, I do want you to unmute. I want you to be able to speak. So when we get to Q&A, please click participants, raise hand, and I'll be able to see who's raised their hand. I'll call on you, then unmute yourself, say your name and company, and then ask your question. And don't worry, I'll repeat that when we get to the Q&A as well. And then lastly, please close out of all distractions. Just like if we were in person, we'd be putting away our phones and our computers. Please close out of anything that's going to flash or beep. So for me, I close out of my email and my Slack. So please take a minute to do that now so that we can be really fully present together today. And lastly, this is a note that this session is being recorded. We are going to decide together, me and the panelists, to what extent this will be made public afterwards, but it might be shared on our YouTube page and it might just be shared within this group for anyone who wasn't able to make it with us live. The mission of Women's Leadership Program is to empower women leaders at all stages in your careers with the skills and the network that you need to excel in your careers and to create the conditions for other women to thrive. And the purpose of today's session is to look at the leadership concepts that we've been learning about together for almost a year now at Simmons, through our peer workshops and our peer groups, and at the Women's Network events in the context of an actual organization that has women at the helm. Think of this as a bit of a capstone since it's coming towards the end of the program and because leadership is harder and messier in real life than it is in the classroom. Today, we're going to have a moderated panel with three amazing panelists that I'll introduce you to and who will introduce themselves in just a moment. And then we're going to move into the Q&A portion where I'll ask you to raise your hand, unmute yourself, and ask your questions. I couldn't think of a better organization to partner with on this program on our first ever behind the scenes than CBT Architects. CBT is a leading design firm working locally, nationally, and internationally in architecture, interior design, and urban design to create tomorrow's landmarks. A few of their notable local projects include the Prudential Center redevelopment, the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in Boston, the Memorial Hall at Harvard University, the Museum of Fine Arts expansion, the Massachusetts State Senate Chamber, and Liberty Mutual's global headquarters. They are truly shaping the Commonwealth. Also notably, CBT is the most diverse major design firm. This panel is going to offer behind-the-scenes perspectives on leadership, and we're going to look at leadership on three different levels. First, we're going to look at the individual level. How do you succeed in a male-dominated industry? Secondly, we're going to look at the organizational level. How does it feel different to be at an organization that's led by women, and what inclusive practices can they incorporate? And then number three, we're going to look at the regional level. What impact does it have for women to be literally shaping Greater Boston and beyond? Each panelist has prepared a self-introduction, so I will just mention their names and their titles, and then I'm going to hand it off to them. Vickie Alani is a principal and a member of the Chamber's Women's Network Advisory Board, which has been joining you for different programs throughout this program. In 2019, she was named one of Boston's top 10 women in real estate by the Boston Real Estate Times. Maren Reepmeyer is an architect and senior project manager. One of her notable projects is working to transform the Boston World Trade Center. In 2016, she was named a Woman on Fire by Banker and Tradesman. Devanshi Purohit is a senior associate and urban designer who specializes in climate resiliency and future-ready urban planning. She also heads up CBT Architects Women in Design Initiative. Thank you for joining us, Vickie, Maren, and Devanshi. I want to start by asking each of you to give us a brief overview of your personal leadership journey. How did you get to where you are today? And we'll start with you, Vickie.
Great, thank you. And I do want to thank the Chamber because we've had such a great experience being members of the Chamber. So this is doubly thrilling for us to have all the women here with us today and also to be part of this great Chamber initiative. And so I'll start quickly. As I was born in Baghdad, Iraq, and I start there because it's shaped so much of who I am and what I bring to the table. I am an immigrant, I am multilingual, I'm multicultural, I eat different foods, and so all of those things really over my lifetime have shaped who I am and what I do bring to the conversation when I am part of any kind of conversation, whether it's at the leadership level or the design level. And I also come from a very long line of super strong women. And I do think that's shaped my outlook as to what the role of women can be. My grandmother was a survivor of the Armenian genocide. She was one of the few people in her family to survive. And so she was a survivalist in the truest shape of that form, of that word. And then my mom was had to support her family when her father died when she was young. So my grandmother supported her family as she grew up, whatever that family ended up becoming over time. My mom supported her family. And so they were really unbelievable examples. My mom was a doctor. She ran her own office. So I always saw women leading and really doing what they love to do and with some passion. My mom, if anyone who's met her would say nothing short of that she's passionate. She brings passion to her job. And so that was my example. And my father was a person who, and still is, believed in me full-heartedly. And he, to this day, thinks I could be president of the United States, even though it's illegal for an immigrant to become one. He doesn't think that's a stopping point. So it's really great to have people who believe in you. I think that is, and if you don't find it through family, I think it's important to find it through mentors at work or outside of work. But I think it's really empowering to find people who believe in you and who you are. And I now have 2 children of my own, and they're both girls on top of everything else. So I'm hoping I'm passing along all of those lessons that I learned growing up and to them. And in terms of my career path then, so the confidence and all of that came from my background, but my career path started in art, which is what you're seeing as the start of my conversation about who I am. And so art is still to this day my passion in my design and architecture. I think architecture is art, and I combine them on a daily basis. So that's part of the brand in a way I bring to the table in my leadership style. And if we go to the next one, and so my projects run a huge gamut because I started out, as you can tell, from the art side, which kind of translates quickly into the interior design side, but then I became an architect. I had a really great mentor in college who told me that if he saw in me something I didn't see in myself, and I was open to listening. So I would say to everyone about mentoring, you have to be willing to receive the mentoring. And I was very lucky to have someone who was willing to mentor and told me I should become an architect because I can always do interior design. And you can't do it the other way around. And that's really what's made my career. I do both architecture and interiors. I do some urban planning. I work with the urban plan design group in our office. So I do work all over the world. I do interior design, I do architecture, and I think it's all really, design is design is design, and it's all also art. I mean, the whole old days of architecture, architects are artists. I still believe that's happening today. So that's how I got here.
Great, thank you, Vickie. And Maren, can you introduce yourself next?
Sure. First off, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm very, humbled and proud to be a part of this panel today and speak with you all. I think it's a great group, and thank you very much. My beginnings are interesting. I'd like to say I have a very humble background. I grew up, if you see that little map there in the upper left, I grew up in small town South Dakota. So where that little heart is, right on the edge of the South Dakota-Minnesota border. My hometown was about 1,300 people. It was a farming community, very small. And, it's funny when I walk around the streets of Boston today and people say, where are you from? And I say, South Dakota. People get this look on their face. And I've never met anyone from South Dakota. It's just, wow. And yes, people do live there. And I'm actually very proud of my upbringing. I have two very career-driven professional parents who shaped my development and my thinking about career and what to do with my life, very early on. I think, they were very hardworking, and they instilled this work ethic in both myself and my brother from a very young age. They exposed us to many, many things, and basically told us that the world was our oyster. And I believed them when they told me I could do anything. Set your mind to it and just go after it. And seeing how hard they worked, I did just that. I set my mind to something, and here I am today. I'm very proud of my career path. I've had so much fun on this journey. I wouldn't do it any other way. But it's interesting. When I was, I think, in 5th grade, I was given an art assignment. I was always drawing when I was little, and my first passion was in fashion, and is what I like to say. But in the 5th grade, I was given this drawing assignment to draw something in perspective, and it could be anything. But of course, I chose a building, and that changed my life. It sounds like such a silly thing, but it really did. I ended up, winning an award for that drawing. My mom still has that tucked in a drawer somewhere. And it basically was that day I decided I'm going to be an architect. And so that was the journey. I went to school at University of Minnesota for architecture. In my mid-20s, I got a wild hair and moved to Denver, Colorado. That's what that image is there in the middle. The image down there in the middle is my parents. My mom is still, even in retirement, winning all kinds of awards for her leadership and what she does in her career. So that's an image that was taken from one of those events. I decided to, well, actually in 2006, I met my now husband in Vail, Colorado. I was doing some resort work at the time. Anyway, that's a crazy story of kismet. But I ended up here in Boston about a year later. He was living here at the time and was out in Vail on a ski trip with his buddies. So anyway, ended up in Boston and decided to, start a family. I was very career driven and started a family very kind of late in life, and that was a deliberate decision. And now I have 3 beautiful girls. The oldest is Genevieve, she's 6, and we have twin girls who are 3, Victoria and Penelope, and they're just my everything now. But my career continues to develop and grow, and I just am loving this life and this journey that I'm on.
Thank you. Devanshi, can you introduce yourself?
Maren, do you want to talk about your projects?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Please continue, Maren.
No. I extended it so long-winded. I apologize. Just very quickly, these are just a quick sampling of 3 projects that have really shaped my career. I think, early on I was thrown in the deep end on a few things, and there's nothing better that could have happened to me. And I really grew from those opportunities. But my expertise is in kind of large-scale, mixed-use, complex architecture projects. So it's just a sampling. Thank you.
Thank you. Devanshi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So when I was reading about the Women's Leadership Program that you guys are hosting, one thing that really stuck out to me was identify and maximize your own leadership and communication style. So I thought I'd create this quick doodle map of my journey. that I think is my personal style. I love everything about cities and I love creating diagrams. So I grew up in, so if you want to just follow my journey through numbers, I grew up in a city in Western India called Vadodara. And like Maren and Vickie, my parents are my biggest champions, but are also the ones that push me and challenge me the most. I also went to the architecture school in my hometown. And since then, I've been drawn to the art and science of city making. I've lived in 4 other cities so far, and each experience has shaped who I am right now. After graduating, I worked on these 2 projects that were focused on transportation. Interestingly, I went for more contemporary architecture program. One was a heritage park exhibit for Indian Railways in my hometown, and another one was an all-new bus rapid transit system between twin cities. And we were negotiating highly bureaucratic process in local governments. And interestingly, I was one of the only 2 women on a 20-person team that really, actually, that was the first time I realized what it means to have that kind of a gender issue in a work environment, because I never really felt like that in my home. And because of this experience, I sort of moved to New York to pursue grad school in urban design at Columbia. Coincidentally, it was the same year that Sandy happened, Hurricane Sandy, which really reinforced my interest in climate change and resiliency issues. So growing up in India, it was very usual to have summer days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And the city would often flood when it would even be a 3-inch rain in monsoon. Also, my first winter in Boston, the city experienced the record 100 inches of snowfall that winter. So clearly, weather gods have a very unique way of welcoming me into different cities. But after graduating in New York, I worked for this nonprofit that I really, it's run by my professor, and she's my biggest mentor. She has what I call a sense of pathological optimism in everything. But she works with these underserved communities, and I helped assist with this idea of social capital credits with her, which is basically a digital currency. So if you earn credits if you get your kids vaccinated, and you can redeem those credits to get school supplies, for example. So this really helped like a model for equitable and sustainable development in underserved communities. And that really highlighted what does it mean to have social justice and equitable architecture and urban design. I'm still involved and serve as a junior board at that organization. And also, right before moving to Boston, I worked for a landscape architecture firm, which was a whole new perspective on ecology and cultural sort of paradigms that influence urban systems and cities. So all of this together, I brought to Boston and here at my work. And again, I work on large-scale urban design projects. I've decided I'm not an architect anymore. And I think what I'm committed to as a career growth is creating these connected, equitable, and resilient cities that are really for people. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really, really great, and a great way for us to start to get to know the 3 of you. I heard a lot of really compelling themes from each of you about the importance of your background, about the importance of people who inspired you, especially early on in your life, and the importance of kind of finding inspiration either directly around you or in the hobbies that you love. So in kind of keeping to this theme of looking at the individual level, many of the women in this program are in a similar position as the 3 of you in that they are looking to try to navigate a career in a predominantly male-dominated industry. And I'm wondering if you can each share maybe 1 or 2 really tangible tips for how to navigate that sector and or that dynamic. And I'll start with you, Maren, and then I'll check in to see if Devanshi and Vickie, if you have things you'd like to add in.
Sure, thank you. I think, for me, the first thing, just getting to in a male-dominated industry, for me, the first tip I would say is don't view yourself as being different. You know, I think we're all colleagues, we're all professionals, and you know, oftentimes I'll find myself the only woman in a room of 20, 30, 40 men, you know, and it's at first that was really daunting to me in my career, and I was very aware of it. But now I don't even think about it. I just view myself as we're all one of the collective. And you know, but with that, I also try to, I'm cognizant of where I sit in the room. I, you know, try to have a place at the table. I always have a viewpoint and something to say. So I think if you are acting and conveying that you are just like the rest, and that language and everything that you're sharing is as important as everyone else's, that's the first step. And I think the second thing I would say is that goes along with that is the most important thing I've learned in my career as it comes to leadership is really being authentic. I think being true to yourself and genuine, truthful, sincere, and speaking in a voice that's like that. You don't always have to have the answer, but if you portray this authenticity, people will trust you, and really, you know, you'll be beholden to a world of opportunity with that.
Mm-hmm. I love those tips. The first, kind of get your own mindset such that you feel kind of ready and you feel like you're at the same level, and then take your actual seat at the table, and then know what your own style is, which is something this group has actually examined pretty in depth, is finding their own leadership style and really sticking to it and being true to yourself. Anything that you'd like to add, or maybe a different perspective that you have, Vickie and Devanshi?
Yeah, I would only add, I mean, I think those were all exactly right on, Maren. I think that one thing I would add to it is that when there is bad behavior, do call it out. Don't ignore bad behavior, because I think it just continues. So the onus is on us to call it out. I think you have to find your style for doing it, but don't let ignoring be one of the options on the table. So we can talk about that at some point, but I think that's really important. And also support each other to call out. So if somebody doesn't give Maren the voice, or somebody takes credit for something she said, I call it out. I say, well, that's funny, because that's what Maren was was actually saying a little while ago. And Maren, do you want to, you know, like repeat what you said earlier, and give each other, support each other, and give each other the voice at the table.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's we used to have something called Wing Woman Lunch in our office, which was a really informal setting. But to just try to find voices that are usually not there, maybe, or even sort of amplify the voices with your colleagues, but really sort of bringing people together. And also seeking, if you're looking for mentorship, or if you're looking for some guidance, just being, all you just need to do is ask, really. That's what I've learned.
I think that's great advice. I think there's a lot of studies that show that women are equally effective as men, sometimes even more so, at advocacy, but often not comfortable with self-advocacy. So if we can create networks or structures where we're able to take our superpower of advocacy and shine the light on others, that might be a really effective technique for many people in this group. So thank you for sharing, and love the sense of the term amplification. I think it's a super useful one for us to be bringing throughout our curriculum. And it's also a really good transition. So we've been talking about leadership at kind of the individual level of self-navigating through these systems, but I also want to touch on leadership at the organizational level. Many of these participants lead either teams or maybe senior leaders within their organization. So I wanted to start with you, Vickie, and ask, you know, as one of the few women who are principals in the architectural field, how do you approach creating an inclusive culture at CBT Architects?
Yeah, it's something I think about all the time. So I think that's not a thought that should ever go away. But I just wanted to quickly just talk about how we got to where we are, which is CBT was started by three men, architects, which is not unusual all over the world, given the history. We've been around for 53 years. But they, you know, early on, they realized the error of their ways, and they promoted two women to principals. And so these are very old photos, and you can see that there are women leading CBT. if we go to the next one, we do currently have 220 all multidisciplinary creatives in our office. And we were so happy to find out, if we go to the next one, that we are truly 50% women in our office. So, and what we did is we're showing you 50%, all the women in the office are in color that were distributed. So there are equal numbers in the architecture, interior design, graphic design, urban design, all over the place. And we're also equally distributed per level. So we have women at the top leadership, mid-level leadership, and we continue to hire lots and lots of women at all levels. So that we're really proud of that. We think it makes for a much better place to work. And that's my belief, that the place is better for the diversity, and not just gender diversity, but you can see there's lots of cultural diversity, color diversity. So the more voices we have at the table, I think the richer our projects become, and the richer our storylines become for how we're coming up with solutions for these global international projects. We also, because we have women leadership, you know, when somebody asks, like when Devanshi and Litau came to me and said, you know, we think this defunct old women in design group, which kind of faded off because it turned into kind of a session where people complained about things, can we revive it? Because we feel the need for the camaraderie and the support, that I'm able to say, yes, let's find that path. And so they get that support for those initiatives that they are thinking of. And the only way to say yes, though, was to say it can't just be a place that we talk about what's wrong with the world. We need to find a forum that says, what do we see for the future? What's our vision and passion for what women are going to do? And I think that's what's happened with our Women in Design initiative. So we pushed back, we changed the stereotype, and I think Devanshi is going to give a little bit of the history of that group.
Yeah, so just continuing the conversation, it was really about, instead of, you know, pointing out what's wrong with the world, how do we inspire each other, how do we celebrate each other, and how do we encourage each other? And not just for women in design, but really everywhere. So we have, we've been leading these thought leadership topics on leadership, advocacy, mentorship, on how to affect change, career growth, and we've been inviting not just architects, but, you know, people from marketing, people who are great communicators, people from engineering backgrounds, technology backgrounds, to come to CBT and really talk about how to navigate the world in general. And the images that you're seeing here is really a culmination of all of those ideas that we put together to celebrate Women's Month in March, which was right at the time that we had to go and lock ourselves down in our houses. But the exhibit that we launched was to honor the women of CBT, and it really showcased their journeys as part of this exhibit. It's still online in our storefront on Canal Street. So if you're walking around there, just check it out.
I love that, and I love the idea of being part of the proactive solution and having and proposing the vision for what we want to see in our inclusive cultures. And I'm also curious, so right now we've been talking about kind of the org-wide level, and for some folks on this call, they might be thinking more about their own team level. That might be more like the locus of their control. I'm wondering, Maren, can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the inclusive practices you've been thinking about when you think about leading your own team as opposed to this org-wide initiative?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. You know, I think part of it is I like to spend a lot of time with my team on career pathing. So just a lot of talking and listening and understanding where an individual's goals are and helping them find that path. I think also along with that is creating opportunities at every level. So regardless if you're an intern or you're, you know, well seasoned in your career, I think seeking out opportunities to gain leadership skills, you know, whether that be presenting something to a small group or to a larger group, putting together a white paper, trying to get published, you know, larger scale PR things. I think there's leadership opportunities everywhere you look. And I think a lot of times that's something that's daunting, maybe for those that are, earlier on in their career and trying to find those things, or how to grab that bull by the horns and go after it. But I think it's that, getting that exposure and that experience helps every step of the way. And so I would say a lot of it is also along with, creating diverse teams, but creating leadership opportunities within those teams at all levels.
I love that. We talked about amplification at the table, and now also thinking about amplification in terms of how work is divided and assigned. I think that's really insightful. Thank you for that. And so, Vickie, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about COVID. We are all thinking about that a lot right now. So can you tell us a little bit about how you are leading the organization through COVID? And I know on our prep call, you mentioned there's even some things you're hoping to bring back with you as a result of how things have changed since COVID. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, I'm the eternal optimist, and almost to a fault. So, it's good to have partners because we all balance each other out. So I'm the one who's known for the optimistic view relentlessly. And so I'm optimistic here, like that this is really a time, the COVID situation, the condition that we're all in, has been a great equalizer, first of all. Like, the people who show up on your screen are not the most powerful people or the loudest people. They're the people who logged in first or who are speaking at the moment. And so everyone has an equal seat at the table in this Zoom, WebEx, Skype world, which has been a real eye-opener for all of us. And we all have an equal size box. There's not like the big guys and the small guys, right, on the screen. So that is something to be really happy about, right, and to take advantage of. And so I'd like to find a way to bring that back to the office. Like, we've learned a lot by having meetings like this. And so can we bring that scenario back to the office where, somebody doesn't wait for the big person to come into the room and sit before they sit. Like, just go ahead and sit and let's have a meeting. Because as Maren said, we're all invited for a reason, and we're all expected to contribute something to the table. So get to the table and sit down and be prepared and be part of the meeting like you are on this call, right? And so that's one of the things. I think also, trying to think about why people would go to the office now that it's clear. Like, there were all these stopping points for a while, like we can't all work from home, the systems can't handle it, the computers can't handle it, people can't handle it, we won't be able to do our work. Well, that all went away like overnight, and we're all doing a phenomenal job. Work is getting done, people are focused, people are loving it. And so thinking of why you're inviting people back to the office has been a focus of mine and a few of the partners. Like, what are the reasons to have people back in the office? What are the benefits of being together? And let's have the new office be about that, not about physically being there, but being collaborative, or having more space really to work on the physical things that we make. So, because we do buildings, right? There's a lot of physical materials. So should more of the office be dedicated to putting together the physical materials and the samples of our projects instead of just housing bodies at desks? And so I think there's a real opportunity here during COVID to lead through the opportunity that this affords us, since we're all distributed in a different way and working very, very differently. And I would say the other thing I'm trying to do is to be bold in our thinking, like not be afraid, not be anxious about the decisions that we're making. There's a lot to fear out there, but I think the leadership, the job of leadership is to step outside of that fear. There's plenty of opportunity to be afraid and anxious. We have to be empathetic and understanding, absolutely, no doubt, but we can be bold in our thinking about what this means for our organization.
Absolutely. And I know I would like to bring back my, working in joggers every single day piece of.
Slippers. I got slippers here. Yep.
I do too. So I completely agree that this is an opportunity for us to kind of reimagine what return to work or the future of work might look like. And speaking of that, I kind of want to now shift gears into thinking about the regional level. And you were talking a lot, Vickie, about physical office buildings and like, what will their role be? What will their role not be in the future? And Maren, as an architect, you are not just leading this organization, but literally shaping the city of Boston and beyond. What approach do you take to your work? How is it influenced by your life and identity? And how do you think it will change now that, the whole circumstances have changed with COVID?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I've been fortunate in the last several years to really be focused on adaptive reuse type projects, repositioning projects. I think there's such a wealth of beautiful existing architecture and building in Boston and other cities. So I've really come to find a passion for breathing new life into those buildings, and that's really what my focus is now and has been over the last probably 10 years. And so, what we see on the screen here is a little smattering of some examples in Boston specifically. And, I think it's an interesting approach. I think there's a big, strong story about sustainability in this particular type of work. We're always talking about active placemaking and, the beautification of spaces, bringing people together. That's just kind of the urban realm. I think that's something we talk about a lot. It was interesting to see how, if that changes given this current situation. A lot of people are talking about workplace. I think we're going to see major changes when it comes to workplace. But in kind of the urban realm and urban fabric and the streets that we work and live and walk along, I'm hoping that doesn't change too much, and there's still opportunity to bring beautification and new life into our cities and the places where we traverse every day.
Mm-hmm. And definitely a big part of making sure that our cities are available to us long-term is around climate resiliency, which I know, Devanshi, you do a lot of work in, and I also feel like that has been kind of pitched in some ways in the media as like one of the silver linings of COVID is the, opportunity for climate to kind of renew a little bit in this time when we are consuming a little bit less, traveling a little bit less. So I wanted to ask you, Devanshi, about your work in urban design and climate resiliency, and how do you use your position to effectively influence people internally and externally to care about something, especially something that might feel a little bit longer term in scope and maybe not urgent immediately, even though of course it really is.
Yeah, so going back to your own personal leadership style, I think what really works for me is I have to be really driven towards that cause and be personally vested in whatever core values that anything holds, right? So that's why I feel like I feel so strongly about climate change and resiliency issues. However, one of the biggest challenges before, and that has been exaggerated now, is it is very easy to visualize these maps about sea level rise or heat maps and things like that. What is difficult to visualize is social resilience on how communities are impacted, whether it's senior citizens or kids who are impacted by any weather related catastrophe or a pandemic like today, which is something that we probably need to highlight. This slide just talks about a lot of my work at CBT as well as with other organizations. What is, again, like, I think to me, the best way to bring value is act as a knowledge exchange. So I can bring value to CBT and then take the value from CBT and contribute towards other local or national or international organizations. That's why I put the projects that we collaborate with Urban Lab Institute or the Copenhagen Urban Lab, that really acts as a conduit to knowledge sharing, both from a private public sector standpoint, but also from an organization level to the rest of the world standpoint. If I just mentioned that, for example, Living Breakwaters was the competition entry, which was one of the winners and received a $60 million funding in New York. It was in response to Hurricane Sandy. And bringing that kind of ecological and cultural values back to CBT in projects like the Blue Way, which is really unlocking the potential of Boston's waterfront, or at Suffolk Downs, which is a really large mixed-use development, but really thinking about co-benefits of these resiliency strategies, that you do create this sort of space for flooding water, but that space in a dry condition can really act as a gathering space for people. Of course, there might be different parameters for how we deal with the social distancing aspect of it. So I'd say, yeah, maybe it's more about thinking about the communities and people and sharing of knowledge together.
Yeah, and I think maybe even taking a more macro view of it, maybe it's also just about like figuring out what your constituents' interests and priorities are, and then just making sure that the way you're pitching your priority, whether it's climate resiliency or inclusive cultures, is kind of matching their language so that they see the alignment there, because maybe there's just a sense before that they were divided even though they weren't.
Yeah, consensus building is very important, both internally and externally.
And I think that's a big part of all of our work, you know, just to bring it all back to all of architecture and design and the work that we do changes communities. So we are definitely always involved with listening to communities and coming up with a consensus for what the building should be, what the public realm should be, what the climate resiliency solution should be. So it's always about the people in the community that these things are going into, which is an exciting, really exciting part of the job.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Speaking of our community, I do want to turn things and open things up for Q&A in just a minute. So I'm going to ask one last question just to give everyone time. But for our Women's Leadership Program participants, please start raising your hand now. And as a reminder, you do that by clicking participants, which should be in the bottom, and then click raise hand. And it will indicate to me that you have a question to ask. And please raise your hand now. It will form a queue and I'll know what order each of you raised your hand in, and I'll call on you in order. So start raising your hand now. I'll ask one last question and then I'll look at the raised hands and call on people one by one. So my last question is a little unrelated to the regional level, but it's something that comes up again and again with Women's Leadership Program, which is around work and life. And I always struggle with even figuring out what word to use, because I don't think balance really exists. I don't know if integration is the way we really want to go. But how can each of you speak really briefly to what your approach has been to finding a work-life balance, integration, wellness, however we want to talk about it?
Yeah, I'd say I've learned way too late in my career and really quite recently that the word balance doesn't apply at all, because it makes it feel like you're supposed to be edging towards the right, the side of the seesaw all the time to try to find the balance, which is the most frustrating thing, because there's no place that it actually feels that way, that everything's even. It's actually accepting that everything is in imbalance, and that's the choice that you're making, and that choice is perfectly fine. And so sometimes if I'm taking, and my kids will attest to this, my kids have been to job sites with me, they've been to project openings, I'm an architect, and that's my lifestyle, and I am also a mother, and that's part of my life. And so those two things are like this, they're interwoven, they're not like this on the seesaw. So that's how I've come to it. And I think it's supporting other women in their decision of what that balance looks like. So it's not going to look the same for anybody, and saying, I get you, and we'll find a solution to making that work. That is a good solution for you.
Yeah, for me, I think the easiest way for me to deal with it, I think it's definitely challenging, but for me is to create a true separation between the two. So when, of course, now things are turned on their head, but, 2 months ago, when I'm at the office, I am 100%, basically as soon as I leave my house, I'm on the train going to work, I am 100% focused on work. And as soon as I walk in the door and I get home, I'm 100% focused on my kids and my family. And, and oftentimes, timing, you have to be flexible with your time too, because they don't always allow themselves for that, clean separation. So sometimes it's hopping back online after the kids go to bed, or whatever. But I think it's really tough in these days to juggle them both at the same time. This COVID situation's been tough for our family. I think it's just really hard having both at the same time. I think where you can, I think creating that place where you can 100% focus on the one thing and then 100% focus on the other thing, that's what's worked the best for me.
I think I would, I'm more in favor of disruptions than balance in general. On how can you disrupt what is conventional and try to figure out a new way of doing something. But then it's really about having high expectations out of yourself, but also being okay with whatever you want. If you feel really productive, you can work for 10 hours. If you don't, you can binge watch a series. It's just really how you choose to deal with that first hour, and then the rest of it is the future Devanshi's problem.
I love that. What a great concept of delegating, but to yourself just later. I love it. It's very managerial way to allow yourself to have the work-life balance disruption, however you want to talk about it. So we do have one question in the queue, and I want to warn participants, if I don't get more, I will cold call, and that is my gift to you, amplifying your voices. So I'm going to start with the volunteer. If we don't get more volunteers, I will start cold calling on people. So you might want to consider that and raise your hand. Nicole Corelli, you're up first. Please unmute yourself, say your name and your company, and ask your question.
Thanks, Allison. Hi, my name is Nicole Corelli. I work for BNY Mellon Wealth Management in downtown Boston. And Vickie, my question is for you. You talked a little bit about mentorship and how you've been able to receive advice from mentors throughout your career. And I just wanted to know, how have you prepared yourself to sort of be open to receiving that kind of advice from the mentors in your life?
Yeah, I would say, part of it is, don't ask a question if you don't want to know the answer. And so mentoring is the same. I think you have to bring your whole self genuinely to the table if you want to be a good mentee. Because I think a mentor-mentee relationship rests solidly 50% in each camp. And so to be a good mentee means I'm coming with an open heart to hear what you think and to receive the information that you're giving. Otherwise, you're not being mentored. You're some other kind of relationship. So I would say find a person with whom you can do that. Mm-hmm. And it may take a long time. Not every person you ask to be a mentor and who agrees is your mentor. And so if you after a few times you don't feel like you can be that open, you should go somewhere else and keep trying, because I think to receive the best mentee experience, you have to have that kind of open relationship and be able to hear whatever they're going to say. Because I've received really great information, things like, it might be time for you to move on from that organization that you're with, Vickie, from what I'm hearing. It's kind of like a whoa, like a big moment. It's like heavy, but you have to receive it and then make decisions based on what you're hearing. Either you're changing your current situation or you're moving somewhere else. And so it's important to have those people in your life. And so you have to receive them.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from Javiera. So Javiera, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Hello, thank you, Allison. My name is Javiera Lagunas Alvarez, and I work at the Box Center in Boston. And I had a question. So you mentioned that CBT Architects was...
Oh no, Javiera, you cut
have
out.
Such a safe culture, not just gender, but also diverse.
Sorry, you cut out. So I heard you say CBT Architects, and then you started to talk about inclusive culture. So can you repeat it?
So you mentioned that CBT was started by men. How did it get so inclusive, such an inclusive culture?
So kudos to the three men who started it. I think they started the company because the firms that they were with at the time it didn't feel supportive, even for the men that they were, right? The male architects that they were. So I think they went into it saying, we're going to be different. We are going to make a place that's great for us to work in. They didn't say men to work in. They just said that, you know, we want a place that design and all of these other things are more important. And so they made a place. I mean, when I started there, they said, Vickie, because I said, what am I supposed to be working on? They said, you need to walk around here and figure out what it is you want to work on. I said, what are you talking about? They're like, we found the best success for everyone in this firm is if they're working on something that they love. And I was like, that is just like, you don't hear about that. And so that's what made the firm. And that kind of thinking is so gender neutral. It's about the work, and it's about our passion and the art and the work that we bring to the table. And so I think it automatically, if you have that outlook, it will bring diversity, because it's not a hero kind of a thinking. It's more about the work and how open it is, if that makes any sense. I don't know if I made any sense at all, but yeah, you can follow up with another follow-up question. Maren, did you have something to add to that?
I just said you were making perfect sense. I would agree. I think that, you know, a huge part of it has to do with our culture. And that really comes from the three founders. I mean, if you knew these guys, they just melt your heart. They're just wonderful human beings. And I think, you know, that our hiring practices are based on, not on project need, but rather on fit. And part of that, you know, it's deliberate in terms of, you know, maintaining that beautiful, wonderful culture we have that is encouraging everyone to thrive, men, women. You know, it's very entrepreneurial, and I truly think it comes down to the culture.
Great. It looks like our next question is from Amy Moy. So Amy, go ahead and unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and ask your question.
Hi, thanks very much for your presentation. My name is Amy Moy, and I am the director of the Health Center Network for the New England College of Optometry. For me, a lot of what you said resonated about working in an environment that has a lot of men in it. I think we're a little moving towards a lot more women in the career of optometry, but I wanted to ask you, how do you feel like you're able to stand up for yourself and advocate for yourself in situations where you might want an opportunity that has come up and there's competition for it, or that there's a situation that's unfair, whether it be how you're paid or somebody else was picked for something? How can you advocate for yourself as a woman who might sometimes be dismissed or not listened to as readily because you might be somebody who's quieter and not speaking up as much, or because you're a woman? But do you have any advice for how to advocate for yourself effectively?
Yeah, I mean, Amy, I think it's really difficult. It doesn't come easily every single time. I think you have to think about it a lot, right? As you prepare yourself for that meeting. And that's not always simple, especially if you're soft-spoken. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not normally soft-spoken, but I still have to prepare. And I think some of the things that have helped me over time is being the most prepared person in the room. I mean, it's a high bar, but I think in many ways it's helped me so much to prepare for that meeting, so that I have all of the information. That, because when I get caught off guard is when somebody, especially if it's a man who's louder and sort of I don't know, just stronger in the room, says something I'm not prepared for, I do tend to shrink away, because I'm like, oh my God, I wasn't prepared for that question at all. And I don't like that feeling. And so that's my tool over my career, is to say, I've got to be really, really prepared for all of the things that are going to come at me. And that helps me to keep my voice at the forefront, because I'm like, no, I have that information. I do have an answer for that. I'm not going to shrink away from this person who's being this way to me, who's trying to push me down in any way. And then Maren and Devanshi, you guys should weigh in on this one too.
Yeah, I was also thinking, I think what Vickie, I think you and I were talking about, like, what is your value that you bring to the table, and being explicitly clear about that and communicating that to the group, that if you have a specific skill set that is unique to you, that is sort of irreplaceable, I think that really brings that idea. And the other thing I was thinking about was I'm at loss of words, but I think it was more on the lines of finding opportunities as well. So, for example, at least from a design profession, if you find an opportunity to write a white paper, then it is yours to write, right? It is being aware of those kind of opportunities that align with your value system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's great, Devanshi. I agree with you. I think, really celebrating and being vocal about the value and what you bring to the table, and it may take 2-3 meetings or different groups or whoever you're talking to. I think, you have to be your strongest advocate. And to me, that, isn't the loudest person in the room, but it's that consistent voice and that consistent, you're always showing the value, you're always proving yourself over and over again. And I think then that makes those conversations easier, and saying, focusing on the positive. This is what I bring to the table. This is where I'm headed. This is, why I deserve that raise, or this is why I'm contributing just as much as this other person, or whatever. I think focusing on that, the path forward and the positivity and the value that is yours, that you're bringing to the table, I think is key.
Yeah, I would add too, I think it's really important to not wait to be invited. If there's something that you are passionate about, you don't have to wait for those people to invite you to be that person. Like, you should explore it. Like Devanshi, you're seeing these people like Maren and Devanshi, like each of them is so different in their career paths. They've created their path, and nobody can take that path away from them. They didn't wait for somebody to say, hey, do you want to be a person who leads up all of our repositioning work and be the senior project manager? Nobody asked Maren if she was interested in that. She forged that path for herself. She didn't wait. And if it didn't happen here, I'm sure she would have found it elsewhere. It's not like, oh, CBT, I really hope you can do this. It's more like, well, CBT was like, wow, Maren's awesome at this. We better create a path for her. So if you don't wait and you create the path, then you will be in that position, I would say.
Yeah, and I remembered what I was going to say. It's also about keeping track of what you have accomplished, because in last 2 months I've realized that there are things that I did that I just forgot about or just took them for granted. So I don't know what that is, but maybe like keeping an updated resume every 3 months might be another way of actually bringing that to the table and being able to prove it from a data and a metrics standpoint, that these are the quantifiable accomplishments that I've done so far that can support whatever ask you have, whether it's a promotion or a salary raise.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be shy about, getting that out there on social media too. People see that, not just your employers, but your clients, your, colleagues, your cohorts, to shout out those accomplishments everywhere.
Oh, that's incredible advice. I feel like I was furiously taking notes, thinking about how to prepare to amplify others and to be prepared to amplify our own accomplishments. And so we are sadly coming up on time. I see one more hand raised. So Erin, you will be the last question for today. So please unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and ask your question. And then after we answer this question, we'll come to a close together.
Hi, I'm Erin Willett. I'm from Liberty Mutual Insurance. And my question for you is, what skill set or skills do you see as being most valuable to future women leaders?
Oh, wow, you saved the best one for last, like the hardest one or something like that. Gosh, Maren, you have the answer to that one.
Well, I don't know. I think, I think people will recognize you for how you think. I think we talk about accomplishments, and I think that's one piece of it. But I think if you can also focus on, your problem solving skills and being a real contributor in whatever it is your business is, that you're solving problems, you're creative in how you think or how you approach something, I think is also critical. We talked about authenticity, being trustworthy is huge. Being honest, having some kindness in your heart and humanity. I think there is something about, this is one of those annoying words, but like being likable. I think, people want to be around you and want to work with you if they see that you're contributing in a way. And generally speaking, you're spending all this time with one another. Let's be positive. And, you don't necessarily want to be working with Debbie Downer who, sits across the street. I think there's something to be said about that too. I think if you bring positivity to those challenges that you're dealt with or that you're trying to overcome, I think is one thing. I think always having a level head. I think, one joke that they say about me in the office is that I'm a duck, that on the top of the surface, I'm very calm and collected, but underneath the water, little flippers are go, 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 I keep my stress internalized. I don't want anybody to see that. And I think that helps a lot with perception. And also I think it helps me try to keep an even head about me.
Yeah, and I think it is telling of all what is going on around the world and how the countries with women leaders are leading the charge in this response to the pandemic. Is leaders, irrespective of gender, who are capable of taking the right action at the right time, is going to be the most effective going forward.
Thank you so much. It's an amazing note to end on. I'm taking away a lot of amazing takeaways from today. I'm taking away a renewed dedication for amplification, both of this group and of the colleagues in my life. I'm taking away a renewed sense of looking around me for inspiration, thinking about the things that I already love to do and thinking about how I can bring that to my work, and a renewed dedication to pitching my ideas, thinking about it as a pitch and really being proactive in both my mentoring relationships and in my work relationships. And lastly, Maren, loved that visual of being a duck. I think oftentimes I'm just frantic on the outside and on the inside, both above and below. So I think I'm going to try that out, try out the being paddling, rapidly underwater, but keeping my cool above. So thank you so much for all of the wisdom that you shared today. We really appreciate it. So if this group can join me in thanking our amazing panelists, Vickie, Devanshi, and Maren, and also our wonderful sponsor, Blue Cross Blue Shield, by clicking on the reactions button down below and then giving it a virtual round of applause. So please join me in doing that. And for the Women's Leadership Program participants, up next is Simmons, and I'm really excited we will be able to offer those sessions online. I'm working with them to get some details over to you, so please just be on the lookout for more information from me, and I'll give it to you as soon as I have it. Thank you so much.
And I want to thank all of you women who are on here today. Like, honestly, good for you, and to the chamber also. Thanks for doing this. This is such a great, important way to have conversations. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone. Be well.